What if the person you trusted most in the world betrayed you on what was supposed to be the happiest day of your life? What if your own father chose your brother over you when it mattered most? I'm Sarah Martinez, and this is the story of how my wedding day became the day I lost my family forever. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, I always believed family came first. My father, Robert Martinez, worked as a construction foreman for over 20 years, building homes for other families while barely being present for his own. My mother, Linda, managed the household finances at a local credit union, making sure every dollar stretched as far as possible. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we had each other, or so I thought. My younger brother Jake was born when I was 7 years old. From the moment he arrived, it seemed like the entire family dynamic shifted. Where I had once been the center of attention, suddenly everything revolved around Jake's needs, Jake's wants, Jake's future. Dad would spend hours teaching him how to throw a football in the backyard, something he never did with me. When Jake showed interest in baseball, Dad immediately signed him up for Little League and never missed a game. Meanwhile, my piano recitals often went unattended because they conflicted with Jake's practice schedule. The pattern continued throughout our childhood. When I brought home straight A's, Dad would give me a brief nod of approval before turning his attention to Jake's C- report card, spending the evening helping him with homework. When I won the state debate championship in my junior year of high school, the celebration dinner was cut short because Jake had a friend coming over. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me, but their energy, their enthusiasm, their resources always seemed to flow more readily toward my brother. Jake wasn't a bad kid, but he learned early that he was the favored child. He developed a sense of entitlement that only grew stronger as we got older. In high school, when he wanted a car, Dad somehow found the money to buy him a used Honda Civic. When I had asked for help with a car 2 years earlier, I was told I needed to save up and buy my own. Jake's car insurance, gas money, and maintenance were all covered by our parents. I worked weekends at a local coffee shop to afford my own transportation. College applications revealed the disparity even more starkly. Jake's grades were mediocre at best, but Dad spent thousands on SAT prep courses and college consultants. When Jake didn't get into his first choice school, Dad made calls to alumni connections and even considered donating money to improve his chances. For my college applications, I had navigated the entire process alone, researching schools, writing essays, and applying for scholarships without any guidance or financial support from my parents. Despite these challenges, I thrived. I earned a full academic scholarship to Arizona State University, where I studied business administration and graduated summa cum laude. I landed a job at a marketing firm in Scottsdale right after graduation and quickly worked my way up to account manager. By age 25, I was financially independent and had built a life I was proud of. Jake, on the other hand, dropped out of college after 2 years. Dad blamed the professors, the school, even Jake's roommates, but never Jake himself. My brother moved back home and drifted between part-time jobs, never staying anywhere long enough to build real experience or skills. Dad continued to support him financially, paying for his car insurance, cell phone, and even giving him money when he was between jobs. It was during this time that I met David Chen at a networking event in downtown Phoenix. David was an architect who had recently moved to Arizona from California to start his own firm. He was ambitious, kind, and unlike anyone I had ever dated. David came from a close-knit family that valued education and hard work. His parents, Helen and Thomas Chen, had immigrated from Taiwan in the 1980s and built a successful restaurant business in Los Angeles. David and I quickly became inseparable. He supported my career ambitions and encouraged me to start my own marketing consultancy, something I had been considering for months. When I finally took the leap and left my corporate job to start Martinez Marketing Solutions, David was there every step of the way, helping me set up my home office and celebrating every small victory. Our relationship progressed naturally, and after 2 years of dating, David proposed during a weekend trip to Sedona. The proposal was perfect, intimate, and everything I had dreamed of. We decided on a spring wedding and began planning immediately. My parents seemed happy about the engagement, though I noticed Dad's enthusiasm was somewhat muted compared to his reaction when Jake had announced he was dating his current girlfriend, Amanda. The Chens welcomed me into their family with open arms. Helen immediately began treating me like a daughter, sharing family recipes and stories about their early years in America. Thomas, though more reserved, showed his approval through actions rather than words. When they learned that David and I were looking for a reliable car for our growing business needs, they surprised us with an incredible wedding gift. 6 months before our wedding, Helen and Thomas presented us with the keys to a brand new Toyota Camry Hybrid. The car was pearl white with a beige interior, equipped with all the latest safety features and technology. It wasn't just transportation, it was a symbol of their acceptance and support for our future together. The car was registered in my name, and they made it clear that this was their contribution to helping us start our married life on solid ground. I was overwhelmed by their generosity. My own parents had never given me anything of such value, and here were David's parents, treating me like family before I was even officially their daughter-in-law. The car was worth nearly $30,000, more money than my family had ever spent on a single purchase that I could remember. When I told my parents about the gift, their reactions were mixed. Mom seemed genuinely happy for me, commenting on how lucky I was to have such generous in-laws. Dad's response was more complicated. He examined the car thoroughly, asking detailed questions about the warranty, maintenance schedule, and resale value. At the time, I thought he was just being protective, making sure I understood the responsibility that came with such an expensive gift. Jake's reaction was the most telling. He immediately began making jokes about how I was marrying up and how the Chens were showing off. He seemed irritated by the gift, making snide comments about how some people had to work for what they wanted instead of having it handed to them. The irony wasn't lost on me, considering Jake had been handed nearly everything his entire life. As our wedding day approached, the stress of planning began to take its toll. David and I were handling most of the arrangements ourselves, as our budget was tight despite our combined incomes. The Chens had offered to help with expenses, but we wanted to maintain our independence and pay for our own celebration. We booked a small venue in Scottsdale, arranged for a modest reception, and kept the guest list to close family and friends. The week before the wedding, Jake lost another job. This time, he had been working at a car dealership in Tempe, but according to Dad, the manager had, quote, unrealistic expectations, and Jake was better off somewhere else. The timing couldn't have been worse, as Jake was supposed to be my groomsman and needed a suit for the ceremony. Once again, Dad stepped in to cover the costs, buying Jake a new suit and even paying for his haircut. Meanwhile, I was handling last-minute wedding details while trying to keep my business running smoothly. I had several important client deadlines the week of the wedding, and I was working late into the night to ensure everything was completed before I left for my honeymoon. David was equally busy, finalizing plans for a major project that would launch shortly after we returned. The night before our wedding, we had the rehearsal dinner at a small restaurant near our venue. The evening should have been relaxed and joyful, but I noticed tension between my family and David's family. The Chens were warm and engaging, asking questions about our childhood and sharing stories about David's upbringing. My parents seemed uncomfortable, perhaps feeling out of place among David's more affluent relatives. Jake spent most of the evening on his phone, barely participating in conversations. When David's cousin asked about his work, Jake gave vague answers about being, quote, quote, between opportunities and, quote, quote, exploring different options. Dad jumped in to defend him, explaining that Jake was, quote, 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 quote. After dinner, as we were saying goodnight, Dad pulled me aside. He seemed agitated about something, but when I asked what was wrong, he brushed off my concerns. He mentioned that he hoped I would remember where I came from and not let my new life change who I was. At the time, I assumed he was just having typical father-of-the-bride emotions about losing his daughter. The morning of our wedding dawned clear and beautiful. Arizona's spring weather was perfect, with temperatures in the mid-70s and not a cloud in the sky. I woke up early in the hotel room I was sharing with my maid of honor, my college roommate Jessica, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness that I assumed was completely normal. David and I had agreed not to see each other until the ceremony, so he was getting ready with his groomsmen at his parents' hotel across town. The plan was for me to get ready with my bridesmaids, have photos taken at the hotel, and then head to the venue for the ceremony at 4 o'clock. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until around noon, when my phone started buzzing with missed calls from David. When I finally called him back, his voice was strained with an emotion I couldn't immediately identify. "Sarah, we have a problem." David's voice carried an urgency that immediately sent chills down my spine. "Your dad just left our hotel with the car keys." I stared at my reflection in the hotel mirror, half my makeup done, my wedding dress hanging behind me. "What do you mean he left with the car keys? Which car keys?" "The Camry. Your Camry. He came to our room about an hour ago saying he needed to borrow it for some kind of emergency. When I asked what was wrong, he got defensive and said it was family business. My dad tried to ask more questions, but your father just took the keys from the dresser and walked out." My hands began trembling as I processed what David was telling me. The Toyota was parked in the hotel lot where we had left it the night before, planning to use it after the ceremony to drive to our honeymoon destination in Flagstaff. Did he say when he'd bring it back? "We need it tonight." "That's just it, Sarah. When my dad asked about that, your father said not to worry about it. He said Jake needed reliable transportation and that this would solve everyone's problems." My parents are really confused and, honestly, they're pretty upset. I sank onto the hotel bed, my mind racing. Jessica looked up from where she was steaming my dress, immediately sensing something was wrong. "David, let me call him right now. There has to be some misunderstanding." But even as I said the words, a sinking feeling in my stomach told me this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was exactly what it appeared to be. My father had taken the car that David's parents had given us as a wedding gift and given it to Jake. On my wedding day. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I dialed Dad's number with shaking fingers. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I tried again immediately. This time, he answered on the second ring. "Sarah, honey, I can't talk long. I'm dealing with something important right now." "Dad, David just told me you took our car. What's going on?" There was a pause that lasted far too long. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted to something defensive and slightly annoyed. "Look, Jake's situation is getting desperate. His car broke down completely yesterday, and he can't afford to fix it. He needs reliable transportation to find work, and you and David are doing just fine financially. This car will make a real difference in his life." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Dad, that car was a wedding gift from David's parents. It's registered in my name. You can't just give it away." "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. It's still in the family. Jake will take good care of it, and frankly, he needs it more than you do right now. You have David's car, and with your business doing so well, you can afford to buy another one." The casual way he dismissed my feelings, the assumption that I should simply accept this theft of my property, the complete disregard for what this meant on my wedding day, it was all too much. "Dad, bring the car back right now. This is not your decision to make." "The decision is already made, Sarah. Jake is at the DMV right now getting the title transferred. I've already signed the paperwork as your father." My breath caught in my throat. "You forged my signature?" "I didn't forge anything. As your father, I have certain rights and I'm exercising them for the good of this family. You'll understand when you're older and have children of your own." The condescension in his voice was the final straw. "I'm 27 years old, Dad. I'm getting married today. That car belongs to me, and what you've done is theft. Don't you dare accuse me of stealing from my own daughter. Everything I've ever done has been for this family, and I won't have you talking to me like that. Jake needed help, and I helped him. End of discussion." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold it. Jessica rushed over and put her arms around me as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. "What did he say?" she asked gently. He gave our car to Jake. He actually went to the DMV and transferred the title without my permission. On my wedding day. The words sounded surreal as I spoke them. Jessica's eyes widened in shock. Can he legally do that? I don't know, I don't think so, but apparently he's already done it. I felt tears threatening to ruin my makeup, but the anger was stronger than the sadness. I have to call David back. David answered before the first ring finished. What did he say? He gave it to Jake, permanently. He transferred the title to the DMV without my permission. I could hear David's sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Sarah, my parents are furious. They're talking about calling the police. That car was worth $30,000, and they gifted it specifically to you. This is beyond inappropriate. I looked at Jessica, who was listening to every word with growing amazement. What should we do? Should we call the police? I don't know. Do you want to have your father arrested on your wedding day? The question hung in the air between us. Did I want my father arrested on my wedding day? The rational part of my mind said yes, absolutely. What he had done was theft. Plain and simple. But the daughter in me, the part that still hoped this was all some terrible misunderstanding, recoiled at the thought. Let me try calling Jake, I said finally. Maybe I can reason with him. Jake's phone went straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times with the same result. Finally, I left a message. Jake, it's Sarah. I know what Dad did with the car, and I need you to call me back immediately. That car belongs to me, and you need to return it. Today. While I waited for Jake to call back, I tried my mother's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright and cheerful. Hi, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Are you getting excited? Mom, did you know what Dad was planning to do with our car? The cheerfulness evaporated from her voice immediately. What do you mean? I explained the entire situation, from David's phone call to my conversation with Dad. As I spoke, I could hear my mother's breathing become more labored. Oh, Sarah, she said finally, I had no idea. Your father mentioned something about helping Jake with transportation, but I thought he meant lending him money for repairs. I never imagined he would take your car. Mom, you have to talk to him. This is insane. It's my wedding day, and he stole my car to give to Jake. I'll try to reach him, honey. Maybe there's been some kind of misunderstanding. But I could tell from her tone that she knew there hadn't been a misunderstanding. This was exactly what my father had intended to do, and somehow my mother hadn't seen it coming despite living with him for 30 years. 30 minutes later, Jake finally called me back. His voice was defensive before I even said hello. Sarah, before you start yelling, just hear me out. My car died completely, and I can't afford to fix it. Dad says you're doing really well financially, and this car would really help me get back on my feet. Jake, that car was a wedding gift from David's parents. It doesn't belong to Dad, and it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to me. Come on, Sarah. You're being selfish. You have David's car, you have your business, you don't really need 2 cars. I'm struggling here, and you're acting like this is some huge betrayal. The fact that he could call me selfish for wanting to keep my own property was staggering. Jake, give me the car back, right now. I can't do that. The title is already in my name and I've already put insurance on it. Besides, Dad says this is what's best for the family. What's best for the family would be for you to get a job and buy your own car like a normal adult. You know what, Sarah? Ever since you got engaged, you've been acting like you're better than the rest of us. Maybe this will remind you where you came from. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, unable to process what had just happened. My brother had essentially told me that stealing my car was justified because I needed to be taken down a peg. Jessica was watching me with a mixture of sympathy and outrage. What did he say? He's keeping it. He says I'm being selfish and that I need to remember where I came from. I felt numb, like this was happening to someone else. My phone buzzed with a text from David. My parents want to know if we're calling the police. They're really upset about this. I looked at myself in the mirror. Half my makeup was done, my hair was in curlers, and my wedding dress was hanging behind me, waiting. In 3 hours, I was supposed to walk down the aisle and marry the man I loved. And instead of getting ready for the happiest day of my life, I was dealing with my family stealing from me. Another text came through. this one from my mother. Tried to reach your father, he's not answering. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Jessica sat down beside me on the bed. What do you want to do? I thought about my options. I could call the police and have my father and brother arrested for theft on my wedding day. I could try to reach other family members and see if they could intervene. I could show up at Jake's apartment and confront him directly. Or I could try to salvage what was left of my wedding day and deal with this afterward. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to call the police right now. What they did is theft, plain and simple. But part of me doesn't want to blow up my entire family on my wedding day. Sarah, they already blew up your family. You didn't do this. They did. She was right, of course. I hadn't created this situation. My father had made the choice to steal my car and give it to my brother. Jake had made the choice to accept stolen property. And both of them had made the choice to do this on my wedding day, knowing it would devastate me. My phone rang again. This time it was David's mother, Helen. Sarah dear, I'm so sorry to bother you on your wedding day, but Thomas and I are very upset about what's happened. That car was our gift to you and David, and what your father has done is completely unacceptable. Helen's voice was usually warm and gentle, but I could hear steel underneath her words. We think you should call the police immediately. This is theft, and your father needs to face consequences for his actions. Mrs. Chen, I appreciate your support, but I'm worried about what calling the police would do to my family. Sweetheart, your family has already been damaged. Your father damaged it when he chose to steal from you. Your brother damaged it when he chose to accept stolen property. You calling the police wouldn't damage your family. You'd be protecting yourself from people who have already shown they don't respect you. Her words hit me like a physical blow because they were so clearly true. My family had been damaged, but not by me. I had spent my entire life trying to earn my father's approval and acceptance, and his response had been to steal from me on the most important day of my life. What do David's parents think we should do? I asked Jessica after I hung up with Helen. They think you should press charges. They're talking about calling their lawyer. The thought of lawyers and police reports and court dates made my head spin. But the alternative, letting my father and brother get away with stealing $30,000 from me, seemed equally impossible. I tried calling my father one more time. This time he answered immediately. Sarah, I hope you've had time to think about this rationally. Dad, bring the car back right now, or I'm calling the police. You wouldn't dare call the police on your own father. Watch me. There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. If you call the police on me, you're no longer my daughter. Is that really what you want? To destroy this family over a car? The manipulation was so blatant it took my breath away. He was the one who had stolen from me, but somehow I was the one who would be destroying the family if I sought justice. Dad, you destroyed this family when you decided to steal from me on my wedding day. Fine, have it your way. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've lost. He hung up, and I knew with absolute certainty that my relationship with my father would never be the same. The question was whether I was going to let him get away with stealing from me, or whether I was going to fight back. I looked at Jessica, who had been listening to every word with growing amazement. Call David, I said finally. Tell him we're pressing charges. Jessica dialed David's number while I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. My father had essentially disowned me for refusing to accept his theft on my wedding day. The absurdity of it would have been laughable if it weren't so devastating. David, she wants to press charges, Jessica said into the phone. Can you and your parents meet us at the police station? I could hear David's voice through the phone, though I couldn't make out the words. Jessica nodded several times before hanging up. They're already in the car, she told me. David's father called their attorney, and she's meeting us at the Scottsdale Police Department in an hour. An hour. I looked at the clock on the nightstand. It was now 1:30 p.m., and our wedding ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. In 2.5 hours, I was supposed to be walking down the aisle, but instead I would be filing a police report against my own father and brother. What about the wedding? I asked, though the question felt surreal. Jessica sat down beside me and took my hands. Sarah, we need to call the venue and see if we can postpone. There's no way you can go through with the ceremony while dealing with this. The thought of canceling our wedding felt like another death blow. David and I had been planning this day for 8 months. We had deposits on the venue, the catering, the flowers, the photography. Our guests were probably already getting ready, choosing their outfits, and preparing to celebrate with us. But Jessica was right. How could I exchange vows and smile for photos while my family had just stolen from me and cut me out of their lives? My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Rachel, my father's sister's daughter. Just heard from Uncle Rob about some family drama. Hope everything works out. See you at 4? The text made my stomach churn. My father was already spinning the narrative, probably painting himself as the victim, and me as the ungrateful daughter who had chosen money over family. I could imagine him calling relatives, explaining how I had overreacted to him helping Jake, conveniently leaving out the part where he had committed theft. I scrolled through my contacts and found the number for our wedding venue, Sunset Gardens. The coordinator, Maria Santos, answered on the second ring. Sarah, how are you feeling? Are you getting excited for this afternoon? Maria, I need to ask about postponing the wedding. We've had a family emergency. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. When Maria spoke again, her voice was carefully professional. I'm so sorry to hear that. What kind of time frame are we looking at for rescheduling? I don't know yet. Can I call you back in a few hours? Of course. I should let you know that we typically require 48 hours notice for postponements, and there may be additional fees involved, but given the circumstances, let's see what we can work out. After hanging up with Maria, I realized I needed to start making other calls. The photographer, the caterer, the florist, the officiant, the musicians, they all needed to be notified. But first, I had to call David back and make sure we were on the same page about postponing. Are you sure you want to postpone? David asked when I reached him. We could still have the ceremony and deal with this afterward. David, I can't smile and say vows while my family is calling me selfish for not letting them steal from us. I need to handle this first. You're right. I'll start making calls to the vendors. My parents are handling the guest notifications. The thought of David's parents having to call their friends and family to explain that the wedding was postponed because my father had stolen our car was mortifying. What would they think of the family their son was marrying into? Jessica helped me make a list of people who needed to be contacted. The guest list had 87 people, including extended family, college friends, work colleagues, and neighbors. Each call would require an explanation, and I wasn't sure how much detail I wanted to share. I decided to start with my closest friends and family, the people who would understand and support me regardless of the circumstances. My college roommate, Emma, answered on the first ring. Sarah, I'm just finishing my makeup. I can't wait to see you in your dress. Emma, I have some terrible news. We're postponing the wedding. What? Are you okay? Is David okay? I gave Emma a brief explanation of what had happened. Her reaction was immediate and fierce. Your father did what? Sarah, that's insane. He actually stole your car and gave it to Jake? And when I told him I was calling the police, he disowned me. Good riddance. Sarah, I'm so sorry this happened, but you're absolutely doing the right thing. Your father is completely out of line. Emma's unwavering support gave me the strength to make the next few calls. My maid of honor from work, my college debate coach who had become a mentor, my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had watched me grow up. They were all shocked and supportive. The hardest call was to my maternal grandmother, Nana Gloria. She was 83 years old and had been looking forward to the wedding for months. She had even bought a new dress for the occasion. Nana, I have some bad news about the wedding today. Oh no, Mija, what's wrong? Are you sick? I explained the situation as gently as I could, but there was no way to sugarcoat what had happened. Nana Gloria listened in silence, occasionally making small sounds of dismay. Ay, mija, she said finally, your grandfather would be rolling over in his grave. Roberto has lost his mind completely. Nana Gloria had never been one to mince words, and her assessment of the situation was both comforting and heartbreaking. She had known my father since he was 20 years old, had watched him marry her daughter and raise their children. To hear her say he had lost his mind carried significant weight. Are you going to be okay, Nana? Don't worry about me, Mija. You take care of yourself and that good man you're marrying. Your father will regret this for the rest of his life, mark my words. By the time Jessica and I left the hotel for the police station, I had managed to contact most of our immediate family and closest friends. David had handled the vendors, though several of them expressed frustration about the short notice. The photographer was understanding but couldn't refund our deposit. The caterer was less sympathetic, explaining that the food had already been prepared and would have to be paid for regardless. The financial implications of postponing were staggering. Between lost deposits, cancellation fees, and the cost of rebooking everything, we were looking at thousands of dollars in additional expenses. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father's theft was costing us far more than just the car. The Scottsdale Police Department was a modern building with clean lines and lots of glass. David and his parents were waiting for us in the parking lot, along with a woman in a navy blue suit who introduced herself as Patricia Williams, the Chen family's attorney. "I've been practicing family and criminal law for 15 years, Patricia explained as we walked toward the building, "and I've never seen anything quite like this. What your father did constitutes theft, fraud, and possibly elder abuse, depending on how he convinced your brother to go along with it." Inside the police station, we were directed to a small conference room where Detective Maria Fernandez was waiting for us. She was a woman in her 40s, with graying hair and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "I understand we have an unusual situation here," Detective Fernandez said after we had all introduced ourselves. "Can you walk me through exactly what happened?" I told the story from the beginning, starting with the car being gifted to us by David's parents, and ending with my father's threat to disown me. Detective Fernandez took detailed notes and asked clarifying questions about timing, documentation, and witnesses. "Do you have the original title documents?" she asked. Thomas Chen reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Here's the bill of sale, the title transfer documents, and the registration. Everything shows that the vehicle was purchased by my wife and me and gifted to Sarah." Detective Fernandez examined the documents carefully. "And you said your father claimed to have transferred the title at the DMV this morning?" "That's what he told me on the phone. He said Jake was there getting it transferred into his name. We'll need to verify that with the DMV, but if he forged your signature on title transfer documents, that's a serious felony. It could result in significant jail time." The reality of what we were discussing hit me like a physical blow. My father could go to jail. On what should have been my wedding day, I was potentially sending my own father to prison. Patricia Williams leaned forward. "Detective, what are the potential charges we're looking at here?" "Theft of a motor vehicle, which is a felony in Arizona when the value exceeds $25,000. Forgery, if he signed documents without authorization. Fraud, if he misrepresented his authority to transfer the title. We might also be looking at conspiracy charges if the brother was aware that the father didn't have permission to transfer the vehicle." Each charge Detective Fernandez listed felt like another weight on my chest, but at the same time I felt a strange sense of relief. What my father had done wasn't just morally wrong. It was seriously illegal. I wasn't overreacting or being dramatic. I was the victim of multiple felonies. "What happens next?" David asked. "We'll need to file a formal complaint and get statements from everyone involved. Then we'll contact the DMV to see what paperwork was filed today. If we can establish that fraud occurred, we'll issue warrants for both Robert and Jake Martinez." Detective Fernandez began preparing the paperwork for our statements. As I filled out form after form, describing the theft of my car in official legal language, I kept thinking about my father's final words to me. "Don't come crying to me when you realize what you've lost." What had I lost? A father who thought so little of me that he would steal from me on my wedding day? A brother who called me selfish for wanting to keep my own property? A family that expected me to accept being victimized in silence? Maybe my father was right. Maybe I would lose something. But increasingly, I was beginning to think that what I was losing wasn't worth keeping. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Jake. Dad says you called the cops. You're really going to have us arrested over a car? What happened to family loyalty?" I showed the text to Detective Fernandez, who immediately asked me to forward it to her. "This is actually helpful," she explained. "It shows knowledge of the situation and could be interpreted as an admission." The fact that Jake was more concerned about being arrested than about what he had done wrong told me everything I needed to know about his character. Even now, faced with the consequences of his actions, he was trying to make me feel guilty for seeking justice. Patricia Williams was reviewing the paperwork when her phone rang. She stepped outside to take the call, returning a few minutes later with a grim expression. "That was my investigator. He went by the DMV, and there's no record of any title transfer for your vehicle today, which means your father was lying about having already completed the paperwork." Relief flooded through me. If the title hadn't been transferred, then technically the car was still mine. But it also meant my father had lied to me during our phone conversation, adding deception to theft. "So where is the car now?" I asked. Detective Fernandez made a note in her file. "We'll need to locate the vehicle and recover it. Do you have any idea where your brother might have taken it?" I gave her Jake's address, his girlfriend Amanda's address, and the locations of several friends where he might try to hide the car. Detective Fernandez assured me that they would begin looking for it immediately. As we finished up at the police station, I realized it was now 4:15 p.m. Our wedding ceremony should have started 15 minutes ago. Instead, I was filing criminal charges against my family members. David took my hand as we walked back to the parking lot. "Are you okay?" I thought about the question seriously. Was I okay? My father had stolen from me, disowned me, and lied about it. My brother had called me selfish for wanting to keep my own property. My wedding had been postponed, costing us thousands of dollars. My relationship with half my family was probably over forever. But as I looked at David, at his parents who had supported me unconditionally, at Jessica who had spent her day helping me navigate this crisis, I realized that maybe I was okay. Maybe I was better than okay. "I think I will be," I told him, and for the first time all day I actually believed it. The hours following our visit to the police station felt like living in an alternate reality. David and I returned to the hotel where our wedding suite sat untouched, my dress still hanging pristinely in its garment bag, the bouquet of white roses and baby's breath wilting slowly on the dresser. The contrast between what this day was supposed to be and what it had become was almost too surreal to process. Jessica had insisted on staying with me, despite my protests that she should go home and salvage what was left of her weekend. She ordered room service while David handled the logistics of notifying the remaining guests and vendors. The silence in the room was punctuated only by the occasional ping of text messages, most expressing shock and support, others asking for clarification about what had actually happened. Detective Fernandez called around 7 that evening with an update. "We've located the vehicle," she informed me, her voice carrying a mix of relief and frustration. "It's parked at your brother's apartment complex. We have confirmed with the apartment manager that Jake arrived with it around noon today. We're preparing to execute a warrant to recover the vehicle tomorrow morning." The relief I felt was overwhelming, but it was quickly followed by a new wave of anxiety. What about Jake? Will he be arrested? That depends on his level of cooperation. If he voluntarily surrenders the vehicle and acknowledges that he had no legal right to it, we might be able to resolve this with minimal charges. However, if he continues to claim ownership or attempts to hide the vehicle, we'll proceed with full prosecution. After Detective Fernandez hung up, I found myself staring out the hotel window at the Scottsdale skyline, trying to make sense of how my life had changed so dramatically in a single day. This morning, I had been a daughter, a sister, a bride-to-be preparing for the happiest day of her life. Now I was estranged from half my family and postponing my wedding to pursue criminal charges against my own father and brother. David's phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was his cousin Kevin, calling from the venue where our reception should have been taking place. Kevin had volunteered to oversee the breakdown of our decorations and coordinate with the vendors for anything that could be salvaged or returned. "The flowers are beautiful," Kevin reported, his voice tinged with sadness. "Maria from the venue says they'll keep them fresh overnight in case you want to use them for a smaller ceremony later this week. The cake is gorgeous too. Seems a shame to waste it." The mention of our wedding cake hit me unexpectedly hard. David and I had spent weeks perfecting the design with the baker, choosing flavors that represented both of our heritages. The bottom layer was his favorite chocolate with raspberry filling. The middle was my preferred vanilla bean with lemon curd, and the top was red velvet with cream cheese frosting, a compromise that had taken us 3 tastings to agree on. "Tell Maria we appreciate everything she's doing," I managed. and ask the baker if the cake can be donated to a local shelter or charity. I can't bear the thought of it just being thrown away. While David continued coordinating with Kevin, my phone buzzed with a call from an unexpected source, my mother's sister, Aunt Carmen. Carmen lived in Tucson and had always been the family mediator, the one who smoothed over conflicts and helped everyone find common ground during holidays and family gatherings. "Mija, I just heard what happened from your mother." Carmen's voice was heavy with concern and disbelief. "I've been trying to reach Roberto for the past 3 hours, but he's not answering my calls. Linda is beside herself. She locked herself in the bedroom and won't come out." The image of my mother hiding in her bedroom, while my father presumably defended his actions to anyone who would listen, painted a clear picture of how this crisis was tearing through the extended family. "Tia Carmen, I don't know what to tell you. Dad made his choice when he stole our car and gave it to Jake." "I know, Misha, I know. What he did was wrong. There's no defending it. But I'm worried about what this is doing to the whole family. Your cousins are asking questions, your grandmother is crying, and now I hear the police are involved?" The guilt trip was subtle, but unmistakable. Even Carmen, who had acknowledged that my father was wrong, was more concerned about family unity than justice. It was a pattern I recognized from my childhood. Sarah needs to be the bigger person. Sarah needs to keep the peace. Sarah needs to sacrifice for family harmony. "Tia, I didn't involve the police to hurt the family. I involved them because $30,000 was stolen from me on my wedding day, and I'm not going to pretend that's acceptable just to avoid making people uncomfortable." Carmen sighed deeply. "I understand why you're angry, Mija, but once you get the police involved, there's no going back. Are you prepared for your father and Jake to possibly go to jail?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Was I prepared for that outcome? The rational part of my mind said absolutely. They had committed serious crimes and should face consequences. But the daughter in me, the sister who had grown up protecting Jake from playground bullies, felt sick at the thought of them in prison. "I'm prepared for them to face the consequences of their actions," I said finally. "I didn't choose this path. They did when they decided to steal from me." After Carmen hung up, promising to keep trying to reach my father, I realized that this conversation was likely the first of many. Family members would call, express sympathy for my situation, but ultimately pressure me to be the bigger person and drop the charges. The expectation that I should absorb abuse and theft for the sake of family peace was so ingrained that even people who acknowledged my father's wrongdoing couldn't quite bring themselves to support my decision to seek justice. Around 9 o'clock, David's parents suggested we all go to dinner at a quiet restaurant near the hotel. The thought of sitting in public, pretending to have an appetite while processing the day's events, seemed impossible. But Helen insisted gently that I needed to eat something, and Thomas pointed out that hiding in the hotel room wouldn't solve anything. We chose a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a strip mall, the kind of place where the lights were dim and the tables were far enough apart to allow for private conversations. The irony wasn't lost on me that this was supposed to be our wedding night, and instead of celebrating with champagne and dancing, I was picking at chicken parmesan while discussing legal strategies with my in-laws. "I keep thinking about the timing," Helen said, carefully cutting her lasagna into small pieces. "Your father didn't just wake up this morning and decide to take the car. This was planned. He waited until your wedding day specifically, knowing you'd be distracted and emotionally vulnerable." Thomas nodded grimly. "It's psychological warfare. He knew that taking the car on any other day would result in immediate consequences. But on your wedding day, he calculated that you'd be more likely to stay quiet to avoid ruining the celebration." The calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking when viewed from that perspective. My father hadn't acted impulsively or in a moment of desperation for Jake's situation. He had deliberately chosen the day when I would be least able to fight back, counting on my love for David and desire for a perfect wedding to make me complicit in my own victimization. Jessica, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, suddenly spoke up. "What I don't understand is how Jake went along with it. I mean, even if he was desperate for a car, how do you accept stolen property from your sister on her wedding day?" It was a question I had been avoiding all day, but Jessica's directness forced me to confront it. Jake's actions weren't just opportunistic. They were deliberately cruel. He had to know that accepting the car would devastate me, but he had chosen his own convenience over my happiness. The brother I had protected and defended throughout our childhood had grown into someone who could look me in the eye and call me selfish for wanting to keep my own property. I think Jake stopped seeing me as his sister years ago, I said slowly, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. I became competition for Dad's attention and resources. When he looks at me, he doesn't see family. He sees someone who has things he wants. David reached across the table and took my hand. You don't have to make excuses for him, Sarah. What he did was wrong, regardless of his motivations. The simple validation of my feelings was more comforting than I had expected. For so many years, I had been trained to minimize my own hurt, to find ways to understand and forgive behavior that was fundamentally unacceptable. David's refusal to participate in that pattern felt like permission to trust my own instincts about what had happened. As we finished dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake's girlfriend, Amanda. I had only met her a few times at family gatherings, and she had always seemed pleasant but distant. Her message was brief but pointed. Jake told me what happened. You're really gonna ruin his life over a car? He's finally getting back on his feet. The message revealed how thoroughly my father and Jake had managed to spin the narrative. In their version of events, I was the villain, the successful, privileged sister who was too selfish to help her struggling brother. The fact that helping in this case meant allowing them to steal from me was apparently irrelevant. I showed the text to the others at the table, and Thomas's face darkened with anger. This is exactly why we need to pursue this through the legal system, he said firmly. They're going to continue manipulating the situation and painting you as the aggressor until there are official consequences. Helen nodded in agreement. Amanda's message proves that Jake isn't taking responsibility for what he did. He's portrayed himself as the victim to his girlfriend, which means he's probably doing the same thing with other family members. The thought of Jake calling our relatives, explaining how his cruel, successful sister was trying to have him arrested for accepting a gift from their father, made my stomach turn. By the time this was over, half the family would probably believe that I was the one who had destroyed family relationships over money and material possessions. We returned to the hotel around 10:30, and I finally allowed myself to look at my wedding dress hanging in the closet. The ivory silk seemed to glow in the dim lighting, and the intricate beadwork on the bodice caught the light from the hallway. David and I had spent months finding the perfect dress, visiting boutiques throughout Phoenix and Scottsdale, before finally discovering this one at a small shop owned by a mother-daughter team who had immigrated from Lebanon. The dress had required 3 fittings to achieve the perfect fit, and the final appointment had been just a week ago. The seamstress, Fatima, had tears in her eyes as she made the last adjustments, commenting on how radiant I looked and how lucky David was to marry such a beautiful bride. The memory of her joy and pride in her work made the current situation even more heartbreaking. We'll wear it soon, David said softly, appearing behind me in the doorway. This doesn't change anything between us, it just postpones the celebration. I leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his steady presence. Do you think we're doing the right thing, pressing charges? I think we're doing the only thing that makes sense. Your father committed multiple felonies, and your brother was complicit. If we don't hold them accountable, what message does that send? That they can steal from us whenever they decide we have more than we deserve. His logic was unassailable, but the emotional cost of the decision was staggering. Even if we got the car back, even if my father and Jake faced consequences for their actions, the damage to family relationships would be permanent. There would be no going back to holiday dinners and birthday celebrations where we all pretended to be a loving, functional family. Around midnight, as David and Jessica finally convinced me to try to get some sleep, my phone rang one last time. The caller ID showed my father's number, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity and a stubborn need to hear what he could possibly say at this point made me answer. Sarah. His voice was different. Tired, maybe even slightly slurred as if he had been drinking. I've been thinking about what happened today. I waited, giving him space to continue, though I had little hope that he was calling to apologize or make things right. You know, when you were little, you used to come to me with every scraped knee, every hurt feeling. You trusted me to fix things for you. His voice carried a note of nostalgia that seemed completely inappropriate given the circumstances. "I don't understand when you stopped trusting me." The manipulation was so blatant it took my breath away. He was trying to reframe his theft as a violation of my trust in him, rather than acknowledging his betrayal of my trust. "Dad, I stopped trusting you when you stole $30,000 from me on my wedding day." "I was trying to help both of my children," he said, and I could hear the defensive anger creeping back into his voice. "Jake needed that car, and you have other options. I thought you'd understand that family comes first. If family came first, you wouldn't have stolen from your daughter to give an unearned gift to your son." There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of his breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was cold and final. "I raised you better than this, Sarah. Your mother and I sacrificed everything to give you and Jake opportunities. And this is how you repay us. By calling the police on your own father?" The complete lack of self-awareness in his words was staggering. In his mind, he was still the victim, still the father who had been wronged by an ungrateful daughter. There was no acknowledgement of what he had done, no remorse for the pain he had caused, no recognition that his actions had been wrong. "Dad, I'm going to hang up now. If you want to make this right, you know what you need to do. Return the car and take responsibility for what you've done." "The car belongs to Jake now," he said firmly. "And if you want to destroy this family over it, that's your choice. But don't expect me to be there to pick up the pieces when you realize what you've lost." The line went dead, and I stared at the phone in the darkness of the hotel room. In the space of one day, I had lost my father, my brother, and possibly several other family members who would inevitably take sides in this conflict. The family I had grown up believing in, despite its flaws, had revealed itself to be built on conditional love and fundamental inequality. But as I lay in the darkness, listening to David's steady breathing beside me and thinking about the unwavering support I had received from his family, from Jessica, from friends who had called throughout the day to offer help and encouragement, I began to understand something important. Family wasn't just about blood relationships and shared history. It was about mutual respect, genuine care, and the willingness to support each other through difficult times. My biological family had failed that test spectacularly, but the family I was choosing, David, his parents, the friends who had rallied around us today, had proven their worth when it mattered most. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as we worked to recover our stolen property and hold my father and brother accountable for their actions. But tonight, surrounded by people who truly cared about my well-being, I finally understood that losing my father's approval might not be a loss at all. It might be the beginning of freedom. The next morning brought a strange mixture of anxiety and determination. I woke up before dawn, my internal clock still set for what should have been the first morning of my honeymoon. Instead of waking up in a luxury resort in Flagstaff with my new husband, I was staring at the ceiling of a hotel room, mentally preparing for the recovery of my stolen vehicle. Detective Fernandez called at exactly 8 a.m. "We're executing the warrant at your brother's apartment in 1 hour. I'd like you and David to be present when we recover the vehicle. Can you meet us at the Scottsdale PD at 9:15? The thought of seeing Jake face to face after everything that had happened made my stomach clench, but I knew I needed to be there. "We'll be there," I confirmed. At the police station, we met with Detective Fernandez and 2 patrol officers. Patricia Williams, the Chen family attorney, had also arrived to observe the proceedings. "Before we head to your brother's apartment," Detective Fernandez explained, "I want to prepare you for what might happen. If Jake cooperates and voluntarily surrenders the vehicle, we may be able to resolve this with minimal charges. However, if he refuses to cooperate, we'll arrest him on the spot." Jake lived in a rundown complex called Desert Palms. As our convoy pulled into the parking lot, I immediately spotted the white Toyota Camry parked in a resident space. Seeing our car there felt surreal. Clean and undamaged, but knowing Jake had been driving it made me feel violated all over again. Detective Fernandez knocked firmly on Jake's door. After a long moment, the door opened to reveal Jake in pajama pants, his hair disheveled from sleep. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition to panic as he saw the assembled officers. "Jacob Martinez? I'm Detective Fernandez with the Scottsdale Police Department. We have a warrant to recover a stolen vehicle. That's not stolen, Jake protested desperately. My dad gave it to me. It's a family car. Sir, the vehicle is registered to Sarah Martinez Chen, and she has filed a theft report. Do you have documentation showing legal ownership? Jake's eyes found mine, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been genuine remorse, but it was quickly replaced by defensive anger. Sarah, tell them this is all a misunderstanding, he pleaded. Dad said you were okay with me having the car temporarily. The lie was so blatant I almost laughed. Jake, you know that's not true. You heard me on the phone demanding that you return it. Jake disappeared into his apartment and returned with papers and car keys. The insurance card showed Jake as the primary driver, purchased yesterday morning. The other papers were photocopies of purchase documents, with Jake's name handwritten in several places. Mr. Martinez, these documents don't establish legal ownership, Detective Fernandez said after reviewing everything. And these papers appear to have been altered without proper authorization. Jake's face crumpled. Look, I really thought Dad had permission. He told me Sarah was okay with it, that she had too many cars anyway. The performance was almost convincing, but I had lived with Jake for 18 years and knew when he was lying. Mr. Martinez, I'm placing you under arrest for theft of a motor vehicle and possession of stolen property, Detective Fernandez announced, producing handcuffs. Watching my brother being handcuffed was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. His girlfriend Amanda started crying while neighbors appeared to watch the drama. Part of me felt terrible for Jake, but a larger part felt relief that there were finally consequences. Detective Fernandez handed me the keys to our Toyota. The vehicle appears to be in the same condition as when it was taken. Sitting behind the wheel felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. The seats were adjusted to Jake's height, and there were fast food wrappers that hadn't been there before, but everything seemed intact. The paperwork at the police station took 2 hours. Detective Fernandez explained that Jake would be arraigned within 48 hours, and my father would likely be arrested once they completed investigating the forged documents. Will I have to testify in court? I asked. Most likely, yes. However, there's a possibility they'll accept plea deals to avoid trial. Patricia Williams explained the civil options as well. You have grounds for a lawsuit to recover damages, the cost of postponing your wedding, emotional distress, legal fees. The financial impact extends far beyond just the car's value. David and I spent the afternoon at the wedding venue collecting our decorations. The space was still decorated with our sage green and ivory color scheme, fairy lights strung along the ceiling, and our perfect wedding cake sitting untouched. Seeing what our celebration should have been hit me harder than expected, and I finally cried for the first time since this ordeal began. Over the following weeks, the legal process moved forward efficiently. Jake was released on bail but prohibited from contacting me. My father was arrested 3 days later when the DMV investigation confirmed fraudulent title transfer attempts. The family reaction was explosive. Some relatives defended my father, claiming I was destroying the family over money. Others quietly expressed support, admitting they had witnessed favoritism for years. My mother found herself caught in the middle. I always told myself that he loved you both equally, just differently, she said during one emotional conversation. But I think I was lying to myself. I saw how he treated you compared to Jake, and I should have done something years ago. Her admission was validating but heartbreaking. How different might my childhood have been if she had confronted my father's favoritism? Jake ultimately accepted a plea deal, including probation, community service, and restitution for our wedding expenses. My father's case resulted in a short jail sentence and significant financial penalties. David and I decided to move forward with a small, intimate wedding ceremony that fall. We invited only close friends and family who had proven their support. My maternal grandmother walked me down the aisle in place of my father. Mija, Nana Gloria told me, your grandfather would be so proud of you for standing up for yourself. Roberto forgot that respect has to be earned, not demanded. The ceremony was everything our original wedding was meant to be: intimate, meaningful, and focused on our love rather than elaborate details. Helen and Thomas Chen welcomed me with the same warmth they had shown from the beginning. In the year that followed, family relationships continued reshaping. Some relatives gradually understood that my father's actions were inexcusable, while others remained convinced I had overreacted. Family gatherings became smaller and more awkward, with clear divisions between supporters and critics. Jake struggled with employment due to theft charges on his record. He eventually wrote me a letter acknowledging he had known the car was stolen and apologizing. While I appreciated the apology, I wasn't ready to rebuild our relationship. My father served 4 months in county jail. Upon release, he made several attempts to contact me through intermediaries, but I maintained my boundaries. The man who had raised me was gone, replaced by someone who had demonstrated that his love was conditional. But the most important outcome was the clarity this brought to my understanding of family love and self-worth. I learned that family isn't just about shared DNA. It's about mutual respect, genuine care, and willingness to support each other. The people who stood by me during the darkest moments proved themselves to be my true family. David and I built a life based on equality and genuine partnership. We created holiday celebrations that were joyful rather than tense, surrounded by people who valued us. Our marriage became the foundation for the family I had always wanted. Looking back 5 years later, I can honestly say my father's betrayal, while devastating, ultimately set me free. It forced me to confront dysfunction that had shaped my entire life, and gave me permission to choose my own path. The woman who filed those police reports was someone I barely recognized, strong, determined, unwilling to accept mistreatment. Sometimes people ask if I regret pursuing criminal charges against my family. The answer is always no. What I regret is the years spent trying to earn love from people incapable of offering it unconditionally. What I celebrate is finding strength to demand better and creating the loving, supportive family I deserved. If my story resonates with you, if you recognize patterns of favoritism or manipulation in your own family, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve respect and kindness. You deserve to have your boundaries honored. Sometimes demanding that respect requires difficult choices others won't understand. But those choices can lead to freedom, healing, and relationships built on genuine love rather than obligation or fear. Your worth isn't determined by how well you tolerate mistreatment, and your loyalty shouldn't be measured by your willingness to accept abuse. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone find the strength to choose themselves when family members forget how to choose them. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.